What's up guys, my name is Sean from White Jade Productions, and today we're talking about the Suré anamorphic adapter. I know I've talked about it a lot on the channel. I really wasn't ever planning on talking about it again, but something has happened. Something monumental, industry shaking. Suré dropped its price. Now, while other lens adapters like the Blazar and Neewer are becoming increasingly harder to find and the moment adapter is just becoming more expensive, Suré, in a wild industry shaking move, has dropped the price from like 500 bucks, I think is what I bought it for like 2 years ago, all the way down to 290, which if you're looking to get into anamorphic on a budget, that's the best news you could possibly hear. Now, obviously the adapter looks phenomenal depending on what lens you pair it with. If you pair it with cool lenses, it's gonna look cool. If you pair it with crap lenses, it's gonna look crap. So obviously not being on too much of a budget is a key factor, but that's generally true with anything when it comes to filmmaking. The more money you spend, usually the better your image looks. Obviously lighting, acting, cinematography, general location do play a role, but hey, you can have great locations, great lighting, but if you have a crappy lens, it's really hard to show that stuff. Now, I am a fan of this adapter mostly because you can pair it with whatever you want. Honestly, I pair it with the Helios 442 and some Nikon DSLR lenses quite often to give it a very distinct swirly look. I get to have an anamorphic image, but I also get to retain that vintage look that is so often compared to anamorphics. So honestly, while some companies like Blazar are putting out, what's their new lenses, the Mantis lenses, they're giving it oval bokeh. That's stuff you can honestly copy with a 3D printer at different stops if you'd like. It's completely customizable. You can do that with this adapter, but honestly, I'd rather use vintage lenses and this 1.25x anamorphic adapter and get a more unique look than copy what everybody else is kind of doing. Now, the real pro to getting this adapter over any actual lenses, obviously, is the cost. You're gonna spend about $1,200, a little bit more on the Blazar Remus lenses, which I love. They're great. I'm shooting on one right now. But for almost $1,000 less, you could just get this adapter and get the same widescreen aspect ratio look. Why? Because on a 16:9 or 17:9 sensor, that 1.25x squeeze is going to give you an almost 2:4:0 aspect ratio. Again, depending on exactly what settings you're using and your sensor, that's what you're gonna get. If you're shooting on open gate, then maybe it's a little bit different story. But personally, I think this is ideal for mirrorless shooters. Now, the footage coming out of it looks absolutely phenomenal. You get a widescreen aspect ratio giving you 50% more viewing room when in a scope final delivery. Basically, if you're gonna give a widescreen aspect ratio delivery to a client, or you're just shooting for yourself and you want that widescreen look, well, if you're shooting spherical, you're gonna have to crop. And you're gonna have to crop almost 25% in order to do it. However, 1.25x, as implied, is an extra 25% more viewing room on your sensor than what you'd normally get. In other words, you make your sensor 25% larger. So combining that with the fact that you're not cropping 25%, you get 50% more image, which is great. You get a larger format look. So whether you're on crop sensor or full frame, you're just gonna get a larger format look. Now, in my opinion, large format is almost always better. There aren't really many cons except processing, and when you're talking about glass, making your image a little more large format, there are zero cons at all. Now, the adapter can tend to soften things up a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. If you have a really sharp lens, it's gonna retain a lot of its sharpness. However, if you have a lens that is soft and has a lot of chromatic aberrations, that will get enhanced by the adapter, so beware when thinking about what lens to pair this adapter with. However, I really can't complain because as for most of the time when I use this adapter, I'm going for a creative stylized look. I'm not looking to crop it in post. I'm not really looking to get a sharp image. I'm looking to get something stylized, creative, and cinematic. So take that for what you will. Now, in addition to the large format look, you will get flares. However, don't expect them to be overly exaggerated. In fact, I would say that the flares are less of a typical anamorphic flare and more of a, I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, just look at the flares. Just look at the flares. They look very unique. They have a lot of breakup, and you can clearly see the elements that are devising the flares, which in my opinion, I think looks better than Suré's own anamorphic lenses. They're way too streaky. They look way better than Blazar's flares in my opinion, unless you stop down those lenses. I think it gives you a cool and unique look, and to be honest, the flares completely are dependent on what the taking lens is. So you're gonna get cooler flares on wider angle lenses, and you're gonna get more tightly bunched up and kind of oval flares on those more tight focal lengths. Traditional lengths like 50 millimeters and 85 is what's gonna give you a little bit more of a typical anamorphic flare. Now, obviously the flares are not the only thing that people care about. They also care about that lovely distortion. Now, again, it's an adapter. It's gonna take on a lot of characteristics of its taking lens, but it does tend towards barrel distortion and not pincushion, which is important. If you want that traditional anamorphic look, Panavision C series, G series look, then it will give you that with its more barrel distortion. I've been unable to get it to go pincushion even when using lenses that have pincushion distortion. I have seen other people make it look pincushiony, but personally I've been unable to get that look out of it, which in my opinion is a pro and not a con. Now, about the focus pooling. One of my favorite things about this lens is the fact that it has a very large focus throw. I want to say it's 260 degrees. I could be wrong on that, but my recollection is it's 260 or maybe 270 degree focus throw, which I think is perfect, especially when working with the crew. 270 degrees of focus throw is it's just ideal. It's a lot. It allows you to fine tune it. However, what will happen is you won't be able to focus very closely. It is anamorphic, and on top of that, an adapter, so you won't be able to get super close focus. However, in my opinion, if you really need to get a close-up, you can just take the adapter off, and that will be totally fine. One of my favorite features about this adapter is it allows you to extend the character of your taking lens. So for lenses like the Helios 442 or my Nikon DSLR lenses that have a lot of swirl in them, it allows me to extend that swirl to the edges of the frame, giving me a lot more swirl. One thing that I really wish the Blazar lenses had was swirl. You get a little bit of it wide open, but obviously I'm not gonna shoot wide open on those lenses. I don't think they look great wide open. I'm gonna stop down and I lose that swirl. I lose that vintage look that they have, at least on the edges of the frame. With this adapter, I get to keep that and I get to enhance that, which I think is perfect. Overall, I'd say that this adapter is beyond worth the money. I paid 500 bucks for it, and I'd say I'd pay 500 again, but you don't have to. It's 290 bucks. I'd say even if you already own anamorphic lenses, this is just worth the pickup. You can get some crazy looks out of it. And if you're new to anamorphic and you want to break into it, I would say this is the starting point. Now, while I was talking a second ago about its focus throw, also it's single focus. It has gears at the front, so you can put it on lenses that don't have gears and boom, you can just focus normally and you don't have to worry about short or weird focus throws. It's really great, honestly, just for focusing lenses. But if you're getting into anamorphic, this is just the starting point in my opinion. I wouldn't start with a Blazar lens. I wouldn't start with the Suré anamorphic lenses. I wouldn't start with any other cheap anamorphic lens. I'd start with this adapter. Of course, that's just my opinion and my creative takes and what I prefer. If you want to do something else, go another route, but my opinion is to get this adapter. It's gonna do you well, and I still use it even 2 years later. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time.